Hello, welcome to Mystic Mondays. Obviously, solo podcasts are supposed to be supernatural strange Sundays, and you're probably thinking like, oh my god, Stephanie, like, get it together. I know, I need to get it together. So I did get sick earlier in the week, and oh my god, my body needed hardcore recovery. So luckily I was able to feel a little bit better, and you can probably hear it in my voice. I sound a little nasally as well. I also went to a D23. Shout out to my friend. She was not able to go Sunday, so she gave me her pass for Sunday, and it was a fun time. We're gonna get into the spooky stuff here. I just wanted to give you guys a quick update on my life here. You know, I even have a haunted doll, a Mickey haunted doll.
Yeah.
Asking my haunted doll which host is his favorite.
Can you ask him who's his favorite?
Who's his favorite? Okay. So
why do you want to make this scarier for me, bro?
Which, like, you know, maybe I should do a whole podcast dedicated to Johnny. I don't know. That might be a good idea, actually. You let me know what you think about that. Before we get into the spooky stuff, I want to go ahead and quickly talk about D23, and if you haven't been, why you should go. I feel like most of us that love the spooky, scary stuff, we also tend to gravitate towards something that's the polar opposite. For me, it's Disney. It's the nostalgia of Disney and growing up, and the outlet and gateway it gave me to this magical land out there. In that case, for me, it was movies like The Little Mermaid, Alice in Wonderland, Nightmare Before Christmas is one of them. I mean, if you saw me on Instagram, you saw that I had like the Jack Skellington Disney, the Mickey ears that I was wearing for D23. So glad I got to do something thematic for it. They did announce that they're going to be doing a Disney villains and car land for the franchise. I know they had one already in California Adventure Park. And then they're also going to be doing like dining, shopping, and more immersive experiences with that, which, like, the Disney villain, when I saw that, I like screamed, because that is so freaking cool. It's something that I've been saying. It's one of the reasons why I love going to like the Oogie Boogie Bash whenever I've been able to. So I'm like so excited. Can you imagine? Can you imagine all the outfits and things that they're going to be having for that? Another thing that they mentioned as well is that they're going to be doing a inspired rainforest debut in 2027. It's like a fictional village, so it's going to have an Indiana Jones adventure. They're going to have Disney's first Encanto ride attraction, which I love Encanto. Like, come on, I'm Latina, so of course. So there's going to be a Monsters Inc. at Hollywood Studios. That's what it says here. And it's going to be a land based on Monsters Inc. There's also going to be they're going to, I guess, double in size the Adventures campus. And then also a Avatar themed destination, like the Avatar, not like a Last Airbender, but Avatar, you know, like the blue creatures. So I figured that I would share these with you guys because I did go to D23. And I was just wanting to update you guys on what's been going on. But also we did a episode on Disney and the theme parks. And I'm going to be doing another episode in the near future about like the occult and Disneyland. So stay tuned for that. I'm so excited for that. I just need to finish reading a couple of things because I don't want to sound like a goofball on here. So without further ado, let's get into the spooky stuff. So we're sailing into the creaky river down the haunted, creepy woods of the Stephanie Strange supernatural story time. All right. So I did see a couple of messages on Instagram that people sent me regarding their spooky stories. And I'm going to be putting those together for the following episode. So stay tuned for that. Also, if you want to share your spooky stories with me, remember, I have my email in the description, or you can write to me at shareyourspookystory@gmail.com, or you can message me on Instagram. I will get to those messages. And, hopefully they will be featured in one of these podcast episodes. Dear Stephanie, I just stumbled upon your podcast and have found comfort in hearing the stories of others who have experienced the strange, as you say. Today, I'd like to share something that happened to my family when I was a child. something that still lingers in me, especially since there have been a few deaths. In my state, it's common belief that when a family member passes away, you must never leave the body alone during the night of the wake until they are buried. This belief is deeply rooted in our traditions, especially in certain parts of Latin America, like Mexico, and I would say even Central America. By the way, I am mixed. I'm Guatemalan and Mexican. There's also a saying that you should never leave a child alone when a close family member has died, as a child's innocence and vulnerability might attract other worldly beings. The story I'm about to share with you was passed down to my grandmother, and it involves my great aunt who lost her husband under tragic circumstances. She was left alone to raise their 2 young children, and on the day of the funeral, as they waited for the body to be transported, my great aunt had to step out of the house for a few minutes to handle an urgent matter. Something about, picking up after some dirty stuff in the kitchen and not having enough cleaning supplies. So she literally just stepped out of the house, and really not that far. I want to say maybe a couple of feet away. Now, she thought it would be safe to leave the children inside with the deceased. And after all, it was just a few minutes. Like I said, it was a couple of feet away. They were familiar with customs and the layout of the home. But when she returned, and literally it was just minutes being a couple of feet away from the house, she was very stunned. And you want to know what happened? When she returned, she found that the children were in a state of utter terror. They were crying hysterically, reaching out to her, "Come closer, come, why did you leave me?" And they told her that as soon as she left, there were strange creatures that looked like monkeys had entered the house. That's right, you heard me correctly. Monkeys had entered the house. Now, according to these children, the monkeys tried to drag their father's body away. The children, young as they were, described the beings as having long arms and grotesque faces. Their movements quick and unnatural. To them, they looked like monkeys, like I said. But there was something very off. Monkeys don't move like this, and nor do they act this aggressive. There's just a strange presence to them. But my great aunt knew better. In our culture, these creatures could have been something far more sinister, and perhaps a type of spirit, or maybe something demonic, drawn by the recent death. The entities that prey on the vulnerable and the grieving. My great aunt called someone from her local church, and they were able to find a healer who was able to come to the house. Now, the healer did ask a series of questions, and they knew what to bring with them before getting to the house. And when the healer got to the house, they performed these rituals to protect the family, warning my great aunt to never leave her children or the deceased, even if it was for a minute, even if it's for a couple of feet away from the house, because they believed that these creatures were manifestations of the family's grief and also that of the departed soul. Maybe calling onto things unintentionally, but nonetheless calling in things from the other side. Years later, I couldn't help but wonder, what were those monkeys? In many parts of Latin America, particularly in folklore of southern Mexico, in Guatemala, and even El Salvador, there are tales of duendes. Maybe it's that. I don't know. Some say they can appear as small animal-like creatures, luring them or trying to cause them harm. Maybe the duendes were hearing and were in the home when all this happened and sees its opportunity. I don't know. I mean, that sounds kind of fetch, but... Now, this story has always made me think twice about old belief systems and customs we often dismiss as mere superstition, and in the end, whether these creatures were just an imagination of the children or a manifestation of their grief, something is truly off about this story and the experiences that it has impacted my family. So anyway, thank you for letting me share the story with you and your listeners, and perhaps someone else has experienced something similar. With gratitude, Gloria. All right, that was a pretty chilling tale. Gloria, thank you so much for sharing that with us and writing to me about that. You know, some of these things, you're talking about a couple things that made me think of my uncle's weird experience that he had at the hospital. So the story goes, so before I want to add in my commentary, I want to share my uncle's story because there's some parallels here. So for context, I'm Salvadorian, and I have a lot of stories from my uncles and aunts, my grandparents. And one thing I want to talk about is my uncle's experience at the hospital he had when he was a little kid. So the story goes is that my uncle was very young. I always picture in my mind, he might have been like maybe 10 or below 10 years old or under 10 years old. And he, I guess, fell off like climbing a tree or something, but he broke his like arm or something like that. And he ended up being hospitalized. And so he ended up spending the night at the hospital on top of that. And, you know, obviously when he got his arm checked out, his family came to visit him and everyone was done for the night. He was getting ready to go to bed, but he felt very restless. And I guess like through where he was staying, he could see where they had like stored blood and like, you know, essentially like a storage unit for blood, I would want to say. I don't know. I mean, it's a different era back then, different countries, so I'm trying to like visualize how this layout would have been. But basically, he saw that there was like this creature that was very small and hairy and had fangs, and it came into the hospital. It took the blood and it jumped out through his window when he was in the hospital, and it stayed with him forever. And so it's really eerie because hospitals are attached to or adjacent to where death happens. You know, in hospitals, you see both the cycle of birth and death and illness, right? And so it's interesting because this story is all about like not leaving children and the deceased alone because something might grab them. And you mentioned being Guatemalan and Mexican. And for me being a Salvadorian, that's not too far away, right? Now, I don't know, all of this is just, could be just pure random superstition, random coincidence, random that my uncle just wanted to share a story and could have made it up. I have nothing to confirm these things, but that's literally what I thought about when you told me this story. And so when I think of the perception of monkeys in many Latin cultures, obviously there is the story of duendes, and duendes come in so many different descriptions. You know, you have like, for me being Salvadorian, you have the description of like the cipitillo, where it's like short and its feet are backwards and it's small and it lives in it can be found in your home and it eats charcoal. But even in like the last, about 2 weeks ago, there was also, I mentioned how like these people were in the Salvadorian jungle and they saw this hairy creature, but it was very abnormally tall. So very different than this description. It wouldn't look like a monkey, I would say. But still, it's interesting how even parts of Latin America, Central America in this case, since we're going back to back with these stories, Mexico and Central America, there's a creature out there that is small, maybe might be embodying a type of monkey. Maybe it is a monkey, and maybe just looking for food. I don't know. Could be a stretch. But what also intrigues me is the cultural belief that a body or a child should never be left alone after a death in the family. I mean, this isn't just a cautionary tale. It's deeply rooted in many traditions of parts of Latin America, emphasizing in the vulnerability of the living and deceased during this very transitional period. It's believed that when a soul is in limbo and before it's properly laid to rest, it can attract all kinds of spirits. One of the stories that I've shared on my social media before is when I went to a wake for my godmother, and my 2-3-year-old nephew, he saw a woman in white standing next to the coffin. And it was really interesting because no one was allowed to go near that when we were doing our prayer. We were all sitting back on our chairs. Some more people on the floor, and we're all doing a prayer, because that's what we do. We do a prayer after someone passes for 10 days for 10 years. And he said he saw a woman, and that's why he was acting very strange when everyone was praying. But there was no woman. I remember back then being a teenager and, you know, not really believing in the prayer aspect and just wondering why he was acting strange, but there was absolutely no one near the coffin. So very interesting to think about that as well, like that symbology and belief system. And so the idea here is that maybe the grief and fear of this family in the story, maybe susceptible to things that adults might, like the children were probably more susceptible to things that adults might miss, like my nephew as an example. There's also the idea that strong emotions, especially surrounding death, can attract spirits or other things. And I've said this before in paranormal investigations, and if you look at certain books in terms of paranormal types of hauntings, right? I've seen this in textbooks and books and stuff like that, but where they talk about poltergeist activity and how children are susceptible to manifesting poltergeist activity, like children who are living, right? Because they can feel such intense emotions. The other thing I'd be very curious to learn is when this happened, because when we think about like the fall, right? October or November, the veil being very thin between our world and whatever is on the other side. So if we believe in the idea of spirits or duendes or creatures that maybe look like a monkey trying to steal bodies and children, I want to think if there's a connection to the time of year as well. Now, I wonder if anyone else who has been listening to this has encountered anything similar or eerie. And if you do, please let me know. You can message me on Instagram. You can interact with Spotify. I believe that Spotify does have the feature now where you can add your thoughts on it. And let me know. I'm very curious to continue this conversation. Thank you so much, Gloria, for including your story. It was such a great fun diving into this. And until next time, you guys, stay strange.